They called him a murderer, a slayer, an assassin. They called him family. And then he killed them. In part 1 of this tale of terror, the man known as Whisper walked out of the Imperial prison with a fragile hope for a new life. But his soul knew his true calling was not in alchemy, but in murder. His talents earned him a place in the Dark Brotherhood, a family of assassins who nurtured his darkness. He became a vampire, a creature of the night, and a master of his bloody craft. But his greatest test was yet to come. Lucien Lachance, a speaker for the Black Hand, gave him his final orders. Return to the Cheydinhal Sanctuary, the only home he'd ever known, and kill everyone, an ancient rite known as the Purification. This is what happens next. This is the story of how Whisper didn't just become a killer, he became a god of death. Returning to the Cheydinhal Sanctuary was like visiting a memory. The others greeted him with warmth and love as always, but this time it was a lie. He was not their brother, he was their executioner. He moved through the dormitory first, a phantom in the torchlight. Antoinetta Marie, who always saw murder as a simple transaction, was asleep in her bed. She was dispatched in a few swift slashes of Sufferthorn. She had no time to react. One down. He found the Khajiit, Mirage Dar, in the training room. The mage and merchant, who had always treated Whisper with contempt, suddenly tried to make amends.
So let's start over, shall we? I know from now on, you and I are going to be great friends.
His desperate attempt at friendship was met with a blade to the chest. 2 down. As part of his plot to kill them all as discreetly as possible, Whisper came prepared with some poisoned fruits. He stole all the food in the sanctuary and replaced it with poisoned apples and chokeberries in key locations. Telendril took an apple at some point, but somehow avoided death, maybe by sheer luck, or maybe she knew something was off. But Ochiva, she foolishly scarfed down the chokeberry left in her chambers and was dead in mere seconds. 3 down. He knew Vicente would not be easily fooled by poisoned food, but he also knew that Vicente had a key weakness: garlic. He found his mentor, the ancient vampire, in his private chambers. Whisper didn't engage him directly. Instead, he slipped a piece of garlic into the old vampire's pocket. Weakened and confused by the plant, Vicente was no match for his protege. Their final battle was a mercy killing. As Vicente crumbled to dust, Whisper felt nothing. 4 down. He found Tainava in the dormitory at the dining table, and the proud Shadowscale greeted him as a friend. As they spoke, Tainava reached for an apple on the dining table, taking a bite. The poison worked fast. His friendly conversation turned to a choked gasp as he collapsed, the ultimate betrayal delivered with a smile. 5 down. In the same room, the wood elf Telendril was resting in her bed. Whisper granted her a permanent sleep, her own grim contract fulfilled without her ever knowing. 6 down. All that was left was Gogron Gro Balmog, the boisterous orc. He would be the most difficult to defeat in straight combat. Whisper found him in the training room and, with the deftness of a master thief, planted a poisoned apple on his person. He walked away, knowing the orc's gluttony would soon deliver Sithis' judgment. 7 down. The family was gone. The sanctuary was pure. He returned to Lucien Lachance at Fort Farragut, his hands stained with the blood of his kin. Lucien showed no emotion, only a grim approval. He named Whisper his silencer, a personal instrument of the Black Hand, bound no longer by contracts, but by direct orders. and as a reward for his ultimate loyalty, Lucian gifted him a horse born of shadow and nightmare, the demonic steed Shadowmere. Whisper was no longer just a member of a guild. He was a force of nature, an extension of the Black Hand's will. His home was ashes, his family was dust, and his only companion was a monster. What does a man become when he's destroyed everything he has? He becomes a weapon. Purification is a legendary quest in the Oblivion community. Let me know in the comments how you felt when you did it for the first time, and what dastardly methods you used to slay your family. And if you like what you've seen so far, make sure you're subscribed for more. Life as a silencer was one of solitude and secrets. No more laughter by the sanctuary fire, only the cold silence of a dead drop. Lucian's orders now came from a hollowed-out rocks and forgotten barrels, whispers from a hidden master. The first contract was a tall ask, destroying a budding lich before he could attain eternal life. Celadane was a powerful necromancer, so Whisper would need all his skills to avoid becoming his next undead slave. When he arrived at Leaf-Rot Cave, he found several zombies and ghosts guarding the place, but he also found a journal, which showed the solution to this lich problem. Removing the phylactery from his person at this crucial stage would be enough to kill him. And so, Whisper journeyed deeper into the cave and found where Celadane was hiding, and as quick as a shadow, snatched the Sands of Resolve, a simple hourglass, from within his robes. Seconds later, the wizard collapsed, his soul having been ripped from his body as simply as a bag of coins. First dead drop completed. The next contract was the eradication of an entire bloodline, the Draconis family. The only target whose location was known was the matron, Perennia. She lived at a quiet farm in the snowy forest outside of Bruma called Applewatch. When Whisper arrived at her doorstep, she was alone with only her canine companion, Jake. Neither of them suspected a thing. Perennia believed Whisper to be a courier, a man from a service she had hired to purchase and deliver gifts to each of her 4 children scattered across Cyrodiil. She had made this task far too easy, as she simply handed Whisper a list containing all of the locations of her children. Whisper took her money and let her return to her slumber. Only for him to slay Jake and herself shortly after. Both quick, lethal slashes from his trusty Sufferthorn. He moved through Cyrodiil like a plague, hunting down her remaining children. First was Sibylla Draconis, a madwoman who had forsaken civilization and lived in a cave with animal companions. This would be an interesting challenge for Whisper, whose skills were mainly honed on human targets. Now, he would be facing down the likes of lions and bears. He battled his way through the ferocious beasts guarding the cave until he located Sibby herself, standing sentinel in the innermost chamber. He had to fight off a bear and mountain lion and Sibby herself, all at the same time, but his powerful poisons leveled the playing field. The next child on the list was Matthias, a guard in the Imperial City. Whisper staked him out after dark, when he could move around freely without suffering negative effects of the sun. After following him through the darkened city streets, he located Maddie's home in the Talos Plaza district. He waited a short while for his target to go to bed, and then slipped inside. He went up the stairs to the private quarters and found an occupied bed with a man sleeping within, only to discover that this was not his target at all. It was another man sleeping in that bed, and Matthias Draconis had spotted him entering the room. Now it was a battle, as he had to take on a skilled Imperial guard without the element of surprise on his side. He managed to defeat Matthias after a deadly battle, and the other man was slain shortly after, but this slip-up led to another bounty on his head. The commotion had alerted the guards, and now he had to pay up for assault and trespassing. Fortunately, the murders were not discovered. Celia Draconis was also a guard, this time in the city of Leowin. Once again, Whisper stalked his target on her daily routine until he found her entering a room in the Three Sisters Inn. He was unable to convince the staff to let him rent a room for himself. He was no longer capable of hiding that he was a monster, so most citizens would react with sheer terror at the sight of him. So instead, he picked the lock and entered in secret. He spoke directly to Celia, and even told her how much she resembled her mother, a sick attempt at intimidation perhaps. Then, he took out his blade and began the battle. Once again, his target was a skilled combatant, and the battle was intense. But even worse, this time he was caught for murder by the Leowin city guard. They recognized him as the one who slew Adamus Philida, and knew he had committed the same crime a second time in their city. After paying off this bounty, Whisper moved on to find the last target, Andreas Draconis, a simple innkeeper at an inn and brewery on the road leading north. The Drunken Dragon Inn was isolated, so he knew this time he would get away without having any witnesses. Or so he thought. It turns out Andy here has an Imperial guard who frequents the inn and hangs around all the time. Suddenly, things got a lot trickier. He watched and listened to the two men conversing. They were seemingly good friends. This would complicate things. Later that night, Andreas went to sleep in a small cot behind the counter of the inn. It took some patience, but Whisper waited for his guard friend to be a good distance away and facing the other way, before he plunged his dagger into the sleeping man's body. Andreas went down in one hit, and Whisper slipped out the door before the guard could notice the body. Now that the entire Draconis family had been slain, Whisper went to his next dead drop location. But things were getting deadlier. The targets were no longer civilians, they were master combatants. First, a Khajiit named Jagasta, a grand master of hand-to-hand combat who spent all his time training in a secret room in his home. Whisper explored the man's house looking for the entrance and discovered a peculiar hidden item, a black hand robe. Thinking this to be divine providence, Whisper donned the robes himself before sneaking into the hidden hatch to the secret training room. Jagasta had earned his reputation as a master martial artist. His attacks were swift, brutal, and he could disarm his opponents with flawless execution. Whisper had to dodge and weave around the flurry of blows he was facing, desperately seeking out his fallen blade. After a long and grueling melee between the two, Whisper finished his target off with a block and parry with Sufferthorn. While there were many unusual references to the Dark Brotherhood within Jagasta's home, Whisper thought nothing was out of the ordinary, and moved on to his next target. Chalice, a wanted killer lurking in a flooded cave. The contract claimed she was being hunted for a brutal murder of her own. Since Chalice was Argonian, she could breathe underwater, giving her a massive advantage in underwater combat. Whisper would need to lure her onto land to make it a fair fight. He encountered her in the deepest part of the cave, and immediately Chalice attacked with her enchanted swords. She followed Whisper as he feigned retreat to a higher chamber. When Chalice climbed out onto the small patch of rocks, Whisper went to work. But Chalice had another trick up her sleeve. Her weapons were enchanted with Disintegrate. Whisper's knives were quickly rendered useless as they were easily shattered by slashing with her blades. Once he discovered what was happening, Whisper changed up his tactics to be more hit and run. Blocking was not going to work with this one. This was the closest call yet, as Whisper barely managed to finish her off before falling himself, but he claimed her enchanted blades as trophies and moved on to his next target. The contracts grew more bizarre. He hunted Alval Uvani, a traveling dark elf trader and master of destruction magic, as he roamed Cyrodiil. Using the information in the dead drop, he determined the time and place Alval would be and waited for him at his home in Leowin. He also knew that this man had a key weakness: honey. If he drank a bottle of mead, he would be rendered completely paralyzed. Whisper broke into Alval's home and stole all his food and drink, then placed a bottle of mead on the kitchen table and waited. Alval Uvani came home and immediately went to his private quarters. Whisper brought the bottle with him and followed. There, he placed the bottle where Alval would surely notice it, and waited a little bit longer. Then, when he returned, it worked? He was paralyzed? Look, the game was bugging out with this one. He said the line that he says when he's been paralyzed, so I'm gonna count it this time. I spent like 2 hours trying to get this to work properly. There are more targets who need stabbing, after all. Time to drop this guy and forget about him. The next target was in the mountains near Bruma. Whisper scaled the frozen peak with his trusty steed Shadowmere. There, he found the ferocious Nord barbarian Havelstein Whoreblood and his animal companion Redmaw. There was no stealth or exchanges of words this time, just a contest of strength and cunning in battle. Havelstein was a tremendously powerful fighter, and it took all of Whisper's skills with the blade to take him down, all the while also fighting off attacks from a wolf. But then Whisper figured it out. Havelstein is strong, but slow. It was a great weakness. Whisper used his vampiric agility to avoid his blows, and then strike back while he was vulnerable. And just like that, another dangerous contract completed. Yet another dead drop led him to Bravil. This time, the target was Ungolim, a master wood elf archer. He frequently spent time with the statue of the lucky old lady, especially at night, when Whisper was at his strongest. So Whisper waited for nightfall and made a stealthy approach behind the unsuspecting man and plunged his knife into his back. There was a brief skirmish, but compared to the targets he had faced down recently, it was simple. Whisper was too fast on his feet to be caught off guard by ranged attacks. As Ungolim fell in the city streets, Lucien Lachance suddenly appeared, his voice laced with fury and confusion.
By Sithis, what have you done? What madness has claimed you? You have betrayed me. You have betrayed the Dark Brotherhood. Why?
But then he realized Whisper had no idea what this was about, and so Lucien explained. The contracts, the dead drops, they had been intercepted. The people Whisper had been killing, the martial artist, the Argonian warrior, the traveling mage, the barbarian, and now Ungolim the archer, were not random targets. They were elite members of the Dark Brotherhood, speakers and silencers. Ungolim was the listener himself. Whisper had not been slaying the Brotherhood's enemies. He had been systematically destroying its leadership, and Lucien was being blamed for it. The true traitor was still out there, playing them all for fools. Lucien, now a hunted man, tasked Whisper with finding the real source of the corrupted orders. The next dead drop was in a barrel near Anvil's city gates. Whisper didn't go for new orders, he went to wait. He watched from the shadows as a nervous wood elf approached the barrel and dropped something in. Whisper confronted the elf, Inelroth, who quickly confessed he was just a messenger, paid by a robed man hiding in the cellar of the Anvil lighthouse. Whisper visited the lighthouse keeper, who quickly gave up the key under threat. The cellar was a tableau of horror, body parts, gore, and a chilling diary. Reading the traitor's words, the motive became sickeningly clear: revenge. The author's mother had been assassinated by the Dark Brotherhood, by Lucien Lachance himself. This entire elaborate scheme, the destruction of the Black Hand, it was all the masterwork of a grieving son. The mother's head, sitting atop a shrine, somehow still recognizable even after all these years of rotting away. Whisper claimed the head and departed to meet up with Lucien and plan their next steps. Whisper was to meet Lucien at Applewatch, the same farm where he slew Perennia Draconis, to share what he'd found. But when he arrived, it was too late. He found Lucien's body suspended in the farmhouse, horrifically tortured and killed. The remaining speakers of the Black Hand were there, led by a woman named Arquin. They had found Lucien, and believing him to be the traitor, had enacted their own brutal justice. With Lucien dead, they needed a new speaker to replace him, and so they promoted Whisper, anointing him as the new speaker to fill the vacant seat. Whisper was now a speaker of the very council that had murdered his master, and he was the only one who knew that the true traitor was still among them. Arquin declared that they must consult the Night Mother herself.
What? What is that? Is that a head? No, it can't be. Sorry, Speaker. I'm distracted.
After midnight, they traveled to Breville, and she performed a ritual before the statue of the lucky old lady. The statue transformed from the quirky old lady into a grotesque monster, revealing a hidden door to the Night Mother's crypt. As the Black Hand descended, the air grew cold and heavy with ancient power. They gathered before a misty, spectral figure, the Night Mother. Arquin spoke, announcing that the traitor, Lucien Lachance, was dead, and asked for the Night Mother's blessing. But the Night Mother's voice was full of scorn.
Foolish little girl. Lucien Lachance served Sithis till his dying breath. The Black Hand remains tainted by betrayal.
And in that moment, one of the speakers, Matthew Bellamont, drew his blade.
I will destroy your Night Mother, and the Dark Brotherhood will fall.
He was the author of the diary, the son, the traitor. In a flash, he cut down two of the other speakers, their bodies slumping to the floor. Bellamont lunged for the Night Mother, but his blade passed through her spectral form harmlessly. Enraged, he turned on Arquin, and Whisper finally acted. The crypt became a whirlwind of violence. It was Whisper and Arquin against the man who had single-handedly dismantled the Dark Brotherhood. But Bellamont was no match for the man who had become death itself. With his blade in hand, Whisper struck the final blow, and the traitor fell silent forever. The crisis was over. The Night Mother turned to Whisper. She had been watching him since the beginning. She knew of Bellamont's treachery since he was a boy and allowed it to happen as a test. A purification not just of a sanctuary, but of the entire organization, culling the weak and incompetent. She saw Lucien's murder not as a tragedy, but as a necessity. And she saw Whisper's entire bloody journey as a preordained path. It was the highest rank, the leader of the entire Dark Brotherhood. The Night Mother then took the Blade of Woe, the dagger he had used for his very first kill, and released its true power, enchanting it with the very essence of dread. Whisper was now the direct conduit for the Night Mother's will, the ear that would hear the prayers of all those in Tamriel who performed the Black Sacrament. Whisper and Arquin were all that remained of the Black Hand. The Night Mother returned them to the Cheydinhall Sanctuary, now a dusty tomb. Arquin would stay to rebuild, to recruit new blood, while Whisper would take on his new duty. He was no longer a prisoner, no longer an alchemist, no longer a simple killer or even a silencer. He was the Listener. He held in his hands the fate of the Dark Brotherhood and the lives of countless souls across Cyrodiil. He had murdered his family, murdered his leaders, and finally defeated the puppet master behind everything. And now he had been named the leader of this ruined empire of shadows. He had gained everything, but at the cost of the last vestiges of his humanity. As the new listener, Whisper holds the power to rebuild the Dark Brotherhood in his own image, to guide its blades across all of Cyrodiil. The whispers of the Night Mother are calling, but what does a monster do with absolute power? Does he restore the Brotherhood to its former glory, or does he forge a new, even darker path? The Book of Whisper is far from closed. Let me know in the comments if you want to see further adventures from Whisper, the unstoppable slasher. For now, thanks for watching, and may the Night Mother always watch over you.